welcome Kai Lowe to the stage. And just thank you, Kai and Anuvo for your lunch today. They are sponsoring this lunch, and Becca is coming up as well. And we'll also hear from a trial participant, Chris Martin.
It's Mason-Hale.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Kai.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Right. My name is Kai Lowe. I'm the CEO and the co-founder of Anuvo. So I'm from Taiwan. I have a tan skin color, 5'10", and as you can tell, I have a foreigner English accent. So before I start my presentation, I would first like to say that it's our pleasure and honor to support this ACI community. And also I want to give a special thanks to Matthew and his team for helping us coordinating our exhibition and the presentation, and also providing us a unique opportunity here to present our work and those studies that we have done and those work we've done during the past 2 years. All right. Can I hear me? How about now? Hello. Is it better now? All right, good. Going to repeat again what I just said? No, all right, thank you. Slides now ready. Oh, yep, no problem.
I guess while we're waiting awkwardly, I'll introduce myself and save time then. My name is Becca Martin, and I am, as Reggie just informed me, the top of the totem pole. I'm a therapist by background and have moved myself into this realm of research to help my patients get more, better, faster. And Yikai is going to introduce the company to you, and then I'm going to tell you about the research that we've been running using their stimulator.
Thanks, Becca. Right, this is a controller. Yes. Right, first of all, many of you might not heard about our company before. So Anuvo is a company that we founded in 2016. So we are a technology and a therapy platform development company. We are focusing on developing bioelectronic medicine, trying to treat injuries and diseases that cannot be cured by conventional medical treatment. So let me give a brief overview of the company history. So starting from 2019, January, we formed a small team to start our product development to develop a non-invasive transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation for treating ACI. Then we spent around 1.5 years to finish our product development. And during the COVID period, we start our pilot study in 3 US clinical sites. And then early this year, we finished our pilot study, and now we're about to start our pivotal clinical trial in the US this year. And then we're also planning to start another study for lower limb next year. And we're hoping that sometime in 2024, we can launch our product so that it can be used by the individuals with ACI. And also want to mention that we are actively looking for collaborators and also for our study participants. So if you are interested in joining our study or interested in doing research with us, please reach out. All right, so here's our product, neuromodulation device. We call it SSTEAM. is it designed to provide exact stimulation. It's a non-invasive wireless multi-channel neuromodulation system. So the user can use a tablet to flexibly configure the stimulator, timing, frequency, number of electrodes, or stimulation sequence. And then this stimulator itself, can you help me go back to the previous slide? Thank you. And then what is very unique is that we design and develop a multi-channel flexible electrode array that adhere placed on the neck or the spinal segment of the user. And in 2019, we got the FDA breakthrough device designation that allow us to work with a dedicated team assigned by the FDA to work with them starting from the inception of the product and have them work with us to develop our data collection plan and also closely work with them to design our clinical trial study protocol. All right, so actually that system is designed for both in clinic and home use. We are also working on wireless sensors that can recall the physiological signals and not all remotely and send the data to the cloud that we are developing right now, so that we think that in the future, the clinicians can do remote programming inside the hospital for the user device at home. So you might be interested in might be curious why we want to develop another wireless stimulation device. But if you look at those devices that have been used during the past decades to perform non-invasive stimulation, start from magnetic stimulator, FES, TENS device, or some research stimulator device. And there are also other companies working on transcutaneous spinal cord stimulator. But what make our device very unique is that we develop our own, we leverage the latest semiconductor technology and develop our own electronics. So that makes the system highly programmable, and it can deliver very versatile and flexible stimulation waveforms. And then if you look at the electrodes that has been used during the past 2 decades to perform non-invasive stimulation, you can see that actually many studies, they use the commercial EsoGuard electrodes that is designed to perform muscle and nerve stimulation. And in some of the studies, when they place the electrode on the neck, since the electrode is not designed for spinal cord stimulation, when the participant move around, the electrode might fall off easily. So some researchers even need to put a tape on top of the electrode to make sure it can adhere well to the skin. And this is our unusual recurve electrode. We develop very flexible electrode array that not only adhere well to the skin during stimulation and during the patient's moving around, and also provide a very better spatial stimulation resolution. So, and also look into some data about those research studies or clinical studies that have been done during the past decades, either through using transcutaneous stimulation or epidural implants. The circle here represent each circle represent the study, and the area of the circle represent the number of participants recruited in the studies. And we found that up to now, there's no large-scale clinical trial that is a clear sham, and that there's no randomized sham-controlled clinical trial as of now. And for many of these transcutaneous stimulation study, the researchers either put 2 electrodes on the cervical spinal cord for upper limb function, or they might put 2 electrodes on the lumbar sacral spinal cord for lower limb functions. However, due to the complexity of the spinal circuitry and the anatomical structure of the vertebrae, by placing 2 electrodes or big electrodes on the cervical spinal cord, actually it not only excite the target underneath the electrode, but also activate other adjacent neurons, regardless of the movement that the subject is doing. We believe that this might impact the treatment efficacy of spinal cord neuromodulation therapy. In the meantime, also there's a possibility that those continuous tonic stimulation might disrupt the sensory feedback from the proprioception sensory input. And then we are curious and kind of interested to know how we can best leverage that unique electron array and our system that we've designed. So we start from the electron array. So this is a recent paper published by one of our collaborators, Dr. Sayanko. So in this study, we use electron array, place electrode on the cervical spinal of the participants. And the midline of the electrode is aligned to the midline of the spinal cord. And we place electrode 3 between the C3 and C4 spinal process. And here is, this figure shows the distribution of the motor pools and the projection to the corresponding muscles. As you can see that more caudal spinal segments project to the hand muscles, and the rostral spinal segments project to the proximal bicep and tricep muscles. And this heat map is one of the example. We use in this small study, in this study, we deliver stimulation at each electrode with increasing intensity and try to find the motor threshold. That is the amplitude of the stimulation that can induce at least 20 microvolt EMG response. And this heat map shows the y-axis is the electrode that we use, 3, 7, 11, and 15. And the x-axis are the muscles, corresponding muscles. We're trying to measure the EMG response. And this color code, the red means lower motor threshold and the blue means higher motor threshold. As you can see, there's a potential to use the more caudal electrode like electrode 11 and the 15 to selectively activate the hand muscles. And then we are also interested to see how the electrode at the left side or the right side works. So we run another experiment to find the recruitment curve. As you can see here, using electrode 1, 5 is easier to selectively activate the left hand muscles, and using electrode 5 and 11, 13, yeah, a bit easier to select. It allowed us to selectively activate the right hand muscles. And this video is a participant of one participant of our pilot study. Can you play the video? Thank you. So we asked him to shoot a video for activity that he likes to do at home, and he chose cooking. And the left-hand side is a video before the active treatment. Before the active treatment, the participant received 2 months of PTOT only. And then during the active treatment, he received 2 months PTOT plus stimulations. So this participant, I think he is HRB and baseline, and then he improved to C after the trial. And then his neurological level improved from C6 to C7 as well. So you can see that after receiving the stimulation, he was able to better use his hands even without stimulations. But I would like to emphasize that we don't think spinal cord transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation is a cure. We think that is a treatment that can help improve the quality of life of the individual ACI and help them to gain more independence. All right, this is what we plan to do next. So we are about to start our large-scale clinical trial. It's a randomized sham control trial. We have 2 independent groups. One receive PTOT only. The other group will receive PTOT plus stimulation. We try to avoid the carryover effect. And this is a kind of study protocol that we've been discussing with the FDA during the past few months. And we are trying to recruit subjects with C2 to T2, and all Asia scale participants can be included. And this study is 8 weeks. And 8 weeks of rehab, the individual will receive 3 times section per week for 8 weeks. And then need to come back at week 13 or 12 for a follow-up visit. And as of now, we have 8 participating sites in the US. We're trying to look for 14 sites. So if you are interested in joining our trial, please reach out to us or leave your message to us. We'll reach out to you as well. And for participants, if you are interested in joining our trial, please also reach out to us as well. So the patient screening website, if you scan the QR code, you'll be able to fill in answer some pre-screen questions to see whether you are eligible or not. And last but not least, we are a small company. We did a lot of work during the past 2 years with only 5 to 8 people. So we started the product development 2 or 3 years ago, and as of now, we are able to do our pivotal clinical trials. What I want to say here is that these tests cannot be done alone. We do appreciate the help provided from like Becca clinician, other researchers, hospitals, and communities, hoping that we can all work together and welcome the input that you provide us. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Great. So as I said before, my name is Becca Martin. I am an occupational therapist at the International Center for Spinal Cord Injury at Kennedy Krieger and an assistant professor in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at Johns Hopkins. And I'm going to use the fact that I can talk really fast to my advantage here. Sorry. So I think that this is sort of really fortuitous timing that Yikai and I follow this amazing presentation this morning because Reggie and Susie and David did a really great job of setting up for you the strength of spinal cord stimulation and highlighting the importance of pairing it with other interventions like rehabilitation. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what that looks like from a clinical perspective and in our research. I do get research funding from these companies and organizations, but I receive no personal financial interest. And so it's important that you know that also. It is also important for you to know that I'm a clinician first, and these are my people, right? Everybody else has shown you these white coat labs full of postdocs. I don't have that. I have a gym, and it is full of patients and therapists and families, and I have to answer to them every day. I do not work in a lab with my head down on one thing. I'm every day, somebody's like, what you got for me today, Becca? It's been 15 years. What's coming next? And so that's really what drives my research and the problem, right? So we skipped ahead, but you guys know the problem. The problem is walking. How do we make durable change in your ability to get up and move your body? And when you look at all the literature and you compare locomotor training, manual facilitation, stimulation, any of the interventions, none of them is proven superior to another. The only thing that we can say is that intensity matters. And so the question becomes, how do we turn up the volume in the system? How do we get more activity, more excitation, more input into the nervous system so that we can get the output that we want? Okay, note to self, push the button sooner. So what we're suggesting is that transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation is an option. It's an answer. The folks this morning did an excellent job of telling you how spinal cord stimulation works and the epidural findings and highlighting the risks associated with surgery and implants and the unknown. And so transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation is non-invasive and reversible, right? It's only on when it's on. It causes, through the same sorts of mechanisms as Reggie explained, excitation in the local spinal circuitry. And it is an easy add-on to existing intervention. He said it, I'm going to say it, all you therapists in the room could be doing it tomorrow. Easy, safe, got it. So in therapy, we hope that it looks like this, right? And that we get a lot of change over time with therapy. But in reality, it probably looks more like this. So we make small change over a long period of time. We know, and was described this morning, that with the addition of neuromodulation, we can make an immediate change in function. Big green button. And we see that in patients when we apply electrical stimulation. You know what, in the interest of not frustrating myself and the rest of the audience, just skip ahead a few, give me all the things on this slide. Yep. Okay, play that first video for me, please. So, nope, all the way to left, yeah. So in this video, the patient has stimulation. This is a chronic, high thoracic patient who's receiving stimulation below the level of the injury with that giant machine there called the Vectra. And he gets this immediate reciprocal oscillating response. And in a second, the therapist is going to turn it off and it stops. He has a little spasticity, but we break through that. It just stops. And this is a kid and he's screaming, "I'm just like Arlo," because he had watched The Good Dinosaur and he was running. Go ahead, play the next one. So here he is over the treadmill. Now we're doing a sub threshold. So obviously if we put him over the treadmill with that level of intensity, he would just be sort of flying. We're not getting any knee extension or hip extension. And so in this case, he's sub threshold standing and we're asking him to stand tall. And you can see he does it. This is a kid who can move nothing without the stimulation. They relax. And he sort of squats back down. And then we say stand tall and he stands back up. So we're sub-threshold stimulation only on his back with dispersives on the hip. And then just play that last one where he's crawling. And so we sent him home with a stim unit and the family was really diligent about doing it consistently. And for the first time in 10 years, he moved his body on his own from one place to another. Now it's not perfect, but it was enough to like make the family cry and feel excited and all of those things. And so we set out to decide to figure out if this really was real and if it works. Better than this one. So again, here's our electrode setup. So we have the active electrode on the back, sort of centered over T10, T11, depending on the patient, and then dispersive electrodes on the iliac crest. And here's a patient from our walking study. And here she is walking without stimulation. You can see her steps are really labor intensive. She's having to work really hard to unweight through her upper extremities. She has no knee flexion in either side. Can you play this one? And here she is 20 minutes later with the stimulation on, and you can see she's stepping faster. She has longer steps. She's not unweighting through her upper extremities nearly as much. And now she has knee flexion on the right side. She's still wearing the brace on the left. Not perfect, but it's gonna allow us to do a gazillion more steps with her than we can do without the stimulation. So we set out to do this study. I presented that to you a couple of years ago. All the patients in the study, which were 10 subjects, had improved walking endurance and speed and quality. But as a good researcher does, I generated more problems and more questions, and you've probably never met a therapist without a wish list. And so we had this sort of non-specific stimulation. I was using an off-the-shelf stimulator we already had in the clinic, and it wasn't specific. And we just heard that that maybe matters. And so my wish list included this electrode array that I could sort of be more specific about the stimulation. The other thing is I only had one set of parameters. I had one electrode, one set of parameters. And I knew, given sensation, that I wanted to be able to manipulate those and in real time. And then the other frustrating part about the machine that we were using is that it plugs into the wall. And so I was like dragging around a 10-meter extension cord because 10 meters is the magic number. So we're looking for something that's wireless, and in walked Exostim. So Yikai did a great job of explaining the Exostim for you. And at the same time, as an OT, right, I can't forget my OT background, we have this other problem that there is, how do you return skilled upper extremity use? The change in upper extremities is frustratingly slow for me as a therapist, for US patients, for US families. It is slow and incremental, and there's a big problem of measurement in upper extremity. How do we measure the changes? Because there's so many degrees of freedom, where walking always looks like walking. There's a lot of function of the upper extremity. But still, I think that transcutaneous is the answer. And still, the most attractive thing to me as a therapist is this is an easy add-on to existing interventions, right? It takes me now an extra 5 minutes to set it up, and it runs while I'm doing other things with my patients, and it's super safe. And so we set up on this Existent pilot study that Yikai started to introduce. So we had 3 sites. Across the 3 sites, we enrolled 12 participants. They received 8 weeks of sham stimulation, followed by 8 weeks of active stimulation and therapy. These are our participant demographics. Like I said, we had 12 participants in all. They were mostly male. They had all cervical level injuries. And we were enrolling all AIS classifications, although wound up with no D. They were chronic. They were on average 8 years post-injury and anywhere from 6 months to 18 years. So here's an important point. Pilot studies are our best first guess, right? They are designed to measure safety, feasibility, and tolerability. They are not designed to show efficacy right away. They're our best first guess. We take that data, we come up with how we need to change our plan, and then we move forward into the pivotal trial that Yikai has already described. And so normally when people stand up here and present to you pilot trials, they show you just video of that one subject that did the best, right? They just show you the one video. And so today I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to show you the data that shows that it's safe, feasible, and tolerable. So first of all, in terms of safety, we look at how many patients completed. We had 9 subjects complete, 3 had to be terminated, 1 moved out of state, 1 signed up for surgery, and 1 we discovered had bilateral wounds on his feet, and we wanted him to go to bed rest to heal those. So we removed him from the study. Here you can see the list of adverse events. I won't read them all to you, but they're all things that you all experience all the time, right? AD, pain, discomfort, UTIs. And I have eliminated the things here that were unrelated to the study, but you know, in research, we have to write down everything. And then is it feasible? Are the therapists able to carry it out? And so each phase in sham and active should have had 24 sessions. And on average, we completed 21 3/4 sessions. The reasons for deviations were assessment, study device administration, and timing. None of them were related to pain or discomfort or request of the patients to terminate. So safe, check, feasible, check, tolerable. We measured pain. And so what you see here are pain scores. On the first 2 blocks are during the sham stimulation, and the second 2 are during the active stimulation. And what you see is that it's flat. There's no change across all 4 time points, which means that there is no difference in the pain that the patients were perceiving during sham and active stimulation. This is particularly significant because it is one of the first studies, aside from a handful, where we're not using the carrier frequency, right? This long debated carrier frequency, and does it really make it pain-free? In this case, we didn't need it. You're like, great, I don't really care about safety, feasibility, and tolerability. I really want to know what happened. I got you. I'm coming to you. So here's improvement in upper extremity motor score. And you can see that there is an indication that we're moving up in the world. Again, this is a pilot study. It's a super small N. It was not designed to show efficacy, but we did see improvement in upper extremity motor score. And we saw improvement in patients' neurological level and AIS classification. So here's starting neurological level and AIS classification, and here's where they finish. And you can see that far less dramatic when it doesn't work. 4. Four patients improved their neurological level, and 5 patients improved their AIS classification from start to finish. And you're like, well, there wasn't that much dramatic improvement in their motor score. And I'm like, yep, I hear you. And it's not uncommon, right? That patients don't have this specific isolated strength, but have greater improvements. And then also we saw improvements in sensation. Okay, so my patient now, I promised you, this is Chris. I'll let Chris introduce himself and tell you about his injury. I met him in this phase of life, right, as an inpatient. He was a 16-year-old kid, and in classic 16-year-old boy fashion, slept everywhere, including on the tilt table and the FES bike, to the point where we had to like call a code one day because we thought he was dead and he was just asleep. I have seen him through this phase of life, right? This is him walking an outpatient and working hard. And I have celebrated with him in this phase of life where he has returned to doing things he loves and is now hand cycling through marathons and things like that. He is my most favorite guinea pig and my always and forever subject number 1. So before he tells you about his experience, I'm going to show you a little bit of data. So what you're looking at here are EMG findings. So this is across time. So on the horizontal axis is time, and the vertical axis is EMG amplitude. And so these were during the MVC of the bicep and an MVC of the wrist extensors. And so you see the other muscles look a little bit crazy, although we were looking for that synergy business that Dr. Darrow was talking about. But in both the bicep, there's an increase. There is a drop after his 1 week of no stimulation and no therapy. So it was a transient effect. But then in his wrist extensors, when he was doing the MVC, there was a sustained improvement. And then here also is some information about his evoked potential for the graph interest in the room. These are evoked potentials of the wrist extensors. Blue is bad, red is good for those of us that aren't super into it. And so what we did is stimulate at each of those electrodes at increasing intensities and looking for greater recruitment. We delivered single pulses and then read the patient's activity. And so you can see over time from baseline determination that he had greater recruitment in his wrist extensors, which was confirmed by the EMG. And here he is. You go ahead, play this video, please. Here he is doing one of the test items on the graph where you have to pour the cup without stimulation in both cases. So this is immediately before he started and at the end when he finished. And you could see that went so quick. He was able to do it after the training and he could not do it. So with that, I'm going to let Chris introduce himself and they're going to play a video of him, I think.
So my name is Chris Mason-Hale. I'm 30 years old. I live in Baltimore County, Maryland, and I work as a community advocate for the Maryland Center for Developmental Disabilities at Kennedy Krieger. Yeah, so I got injured playing football. I was in a head-to-head collision when I was a senior in high school at 16, and that's where I got my spinal cord injury. So I enjoyed playing football. I enjoyed riding bicycles, going out in the woods and like hiking and things like that. And yeah, those were all the things that I really enjoyed prior to my injury. I wanted to be a marine biologist. I love the water and I love fish. And ever since I was a kid, I'd always loved fish and everything. So the idea of being able to study and work with those animals was a really big passion of mine. I was injured on the field that day and was kind of carted off to the one of the local hospitals. I definitely don't remember. A lot was going on. So after that, I ended up at shock trauma here in Baltimore, and that's where I got my anterior and posterior spinal fusion in my neck. So I have a cage here. I was there for about, I want to say, 3 weeks, close to a month. That time was mostly me sleeping and going back and forth between surgeries. It was a very busy time, I would say. Nobody really knew what was happening at the time. Me, my family, my friends. It was all a lot of waiting. I call it hurry up and wait. Just trying to see what was happening. Everybody secretly wishing that it wasn't what we kind of already knew it was. And from there, I moved on to Kernan Hospital, which is now called Umroy. I don't know the acronym. And that was through the University of Maryland. I was there as an inpatient from, I want to say, around September until early December. Uh, Things became more clear when I was there. Learned what my diagnosis was, learned what my life would kind of be like at that point. And that's where I learned the basics of being in a wheelchair. At the time when I was there, I required a power chair. And over time, with physical therapy and occupational therapy, uh, day in and day out for about those 3 months or so, that's when I um, moved on to a manual chair. And that was really nice. I liked the idea of getting strong enough so that I could move on to a different chair. And that meant a lot for my family and I because there was a lot of stress around how would we move the power chair, how would I fit in the house with the power chair, and a lot of things that we would have to change. So one of my goals at that time early in therapy was to try and get out of the power chair. And luckily enough, I was fortunate enough to move on to a different device. Yeah, having a spinal cord injury for me personally was very difficult emotionally because I had had plans for myself, as anyone would when you're at that age and you think that you're going to do certain things, you think that you're going to accomplish certain things. So when you have a spinal cord injury, or when I had my spinal cord injury, I should say, it's a weird thing to grieve yourself in that way, to grieve what you thought you would be, and to rely so heavily on everyone around you, whether it be your family, your friends, doctors, nurses, therapists, to kind of help you craft a new future for yourself. It takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of trust, and it takes an open mind and a lot of creativity. So for me emotionally, I was lost for a while and I didn't really know what to do with myself. So I just focused on therapy and that was really beneficial to me. It gave me structure, it gave me little goals. And for my family, they were in the same boat. I think that it's really difficult to be a caregiver for somebody with with an injury because it's up to the person with the injury to push. I know that my parents specifically wanted nothing more than to take it from me and have it be their struggle, but they couldn't. So I had to not only come to terms with the fact that I had to push through this not on my own, but of my own accord. And yeah, I think that my family we banded together and we really focused on goals and learning more to get through the life transition. My injury, I did a lot of biking and going into the woods and hiking, like I mentioned. Those were the two things that I had to give up, or so I thought, I would say. I found new ways to do them. For biking, I found out about hand cycling, which was something that I had put off because I was just being a stubborn teenager for years. And then finally decided to sign up for a marathon. And that's when I went to Colorado with Kennedy Krieger and had my whole mind blown by just different things that could substitute or replace the things that I used to do, and being able to bike on trails kind of satisfied that need too. hike as well. I've been there since 2009, and I've met a lot of people that have just really helped me to um, pick up the pieces of myself and help me kind of, I'd say, reforge myself into a better version of myself. Um, I had started that journey at Kernan, but then I got to continue it when I moved on to Kennedy, and they've helped me immensely. Since then, they've offered so many opportunities for me to advocate like this and to participate in trips that kind of reminded me what I was actually capable of. They helped me to realize that restrictions can be goals. They don't have to limit you in what you do. And yeah, I couldn't be more grateful to them. I've known most of them for over a decade now. So I learned about it through Kennedy. That's usually how the studies go. Somebody tells me like, "Hey, would you like to participate in this?" And it sounded really interesting. The idea of stemming an area, in this case for me, the area of injury, the point of injury, sounded really interesting to me. So I wanted to see what that was about and try it out. My biggest hope was to see any kind of improvement in my hands or my grip. Um, and my biggest concern was stemming the point of injury was something that I had always been nervous about, but of course curious about. So this study kind of helped me to dive into that and see what would happen. Exciting. I think that I was, like I said, I was really interested in seeing what would happen if we stemmed, for me, the point of injury, C5, C6. And it was really interesting to get the stem on and to go through all the tests and to see how complex the electrode was, because I had thought that the electrode, because it goes on the back of your neck, I had assumed that it was just one big electrode, but I didn't know that it had all these smaller electrodes on it. So going through all the testing phases, and it was so in depth, um, that I was really curious about what would happen. So it was mostly just excitement. Yeah. I would tell patients to expect a full body workout just because it's working on your neck or just because the electrode is on your neck. Your whole body is usually going to feel that sensation. At least it was for me. We were working on OT, occupational therapy skills, fine motor, and even afterwards, my entire body would be tired. I felt like I had a workout of my life using this device. And then over time, it got less and less intense. So I personally felt as though I was building up endurance throughout my body, and I really enjoyed having that feeling and that sensation of being able to use it over time and feeling those improvements. And also, while you're using the device, to take note of the things that were difficult before. So definitely take stock of things that you found difficult before using the device, and then try them with the device and see what happens. While using it, I found some surprises within grasping things or just muscle reactions and twitches and things where before didn't have much movement or a movement that I could rely on. So I would say know your body, come in, and then uh, maybe something will happen. I recently graduated from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County with my degree in social work, and was recently hired at the Maryland Center for Developmental Disabilities. So I'm just looking forward to finding ways to continue to advocate for people with disabilities and watch movies, play games in the meantime, I guess. I would say to patients that are looking to get into studies that there's always options out there. There are so many things that people are trying to work on and create to change the way that we deal with our disabilities and with some of our limitations. But those limitations don't have to be restrictions. They can be goals, things that you can work towards, things that you can work to improve. And similar to uh, stimulation with other devices or standard, or with a wheelchair, we all need devices that can help us to improve over time. And I would definitely keep that in mind.
Great. I think Chris is going to join us now. And we'll take some questions.
Let's have some questions. Thank you both. Chris.
Hello.
Where was that?
That was Chris saying hello, but we
Oh,
can't
that's
see
me.
it
hello,
yet.
Chris.
Hello.
John, can we get a microphone right here?
Hi, Chris.
Hey, Becca.
This is John Gensel. You'll see what I look like and other things in just a minute when I speak. But I may have missed it. What is your primary outcome measure for this study that's beginning in terms of what's going to be the proof of efficacy between the sham and the treated group?
Upper extremity motor score. And then we have, we're also, so in the pilot study, we use the grasp. And I think the grasp, the results got sort of diluted because of differences between hands, and you get a bilateral score, and it's time and not quality and things like that. So we have changed our upper extremity measure, and we're going to use the Q and the box and blocks. Did I get that right? We've changed it a number of times. But upper extremity motor score will be the primary outcome for the upcoming study.
Can you explain that?
The upper extremity motor score. So the upper extremity motor score is the strength rating part of the INSCI for your arms. And so it measures 5 key muscles on each side at a maximum score of 5.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Sam, from the live stream,
Yes, this is for Chris.
hold the mic up close.
Chris, you described that the feeling was less intense and that you were building some resistance or rather tolerance over time. Were the STEM parameters adjusted to increase intensity again? Did that also change?
Yeah, so when I was mentioning that, I was speaking about the fatigue after a session was less intense. And when we recalibrated the electrodes, things would change all the time. I think that we were, correct me if I'm wrong, Becca, but when we would go back in and we would readjust them, different things would be higher, or I would need less stimulation. For me personally, the neck is very sensitive for me. So stimulation could kind of be a bit, my body doesn't tolerate it that well. So we would change it every now and then. It could be, sometimes I could withstand higher amounts, sometimes I could withstand lower. It depended on the day. If that answers your question.
Nailed it.
Mr. Gorman.
I guess that's, I have an engineering question about the design of the electrode array. Some of those electrodes are small, some are large, and maybe this goes to a little bit what Chris says, because of course, stimulating through a small electrode would be more painful. But why the design chosen? It seemed like large, small across the left-right axis. Is that, can you explain that design?
Sure. So for the large electrode, it has a diameter of 2 centimeters, and for the small electrode, it's a diameter of 1 centimeters. And when we use different electrodes to stimulate, different electrodes with different diameters, the device we design is set up current charge density. So for the small electrode, there's a limit of maximum current that cannot go beyond to make sure you are not creating damage to the user. And the reason that we are having big and small electrodes is that we are trying to target at different nerves based on the design based on the vertebrae structure. And you might be wondering why we choose 16. Actually, we can do more than 128 using the same device. But the reason we use 16 is we are hoping that using this electrode array, the users or the clinicians can use a combination of electrodes or not just single one electrodes to sequentially target different muscles pairing with the PT, OT activity that patient is going to receive. We believe that this kind of pairing or kind of association between stimulation and the physical therapies can help the subject improve later. And this is what we are trying to prove during our pivotal study.
Do you find that you're using ultimately for these customized paradigms more the larger electrodes or the smaller, or is it sort of random?
It depends on different.
Yeah, we're using more of the large ones because there is a sensation issue like Chris described.
Yes.
We use mostly the large ones.
A quick question for me. Actually, not for me, from Lana, but it's something that I think about, and I know even people in this room, because they've been in multiple trials. Are you excluding folks that have been in other trials? Of various kinds, or have you considered an adaptive trial design so that there could be a more open inclusion criteria?
So previous participation in a trial is not an exclusion, although it does a little bit depend on what kind of trial. If you have an implant, we can't stimulate over it. So that would exclude you. We don't have any exclusion related to biotherapeutics, stem cells, surgeries of other sorts, except that you have to have
Baclofen?
baclofen is allowed. We changed that one. I fought hard for that one. You have, and your function has to be stable. You have to have 6 months of no change in your function. And so if you're hot off the stem cells and you're getting change quickly, or something like that, you wouldn't be appropriate for the study at that point, but maybe later.
Sasha?
Hi, Sasha Repcheski for the University of Kentucky. I had a question actually for Chris. Chris, in this system that you're using, do you kind of use it as something to exercise, but then you go out and do your things, or are you using it while you're actively doing things? Does that make sense?
So I was only using it on the premises at Kennedy Krieger Institute. So we would have the electrode on and we would be doing different OT tests, fine motor stuff, anything from Connect 4 to pinch and gross grasp. So I didn't get the chance to take it out and then use it. But what I would find is that after leaving a session, that if I were actually similar to that cooking video that they showed in the presentation, I was able to use my hands better. One of my biggest things that I work on anytime I go into OT is being able to grab a knife and cut bread or cut steak. Because you need two hands usually. You need one hand to stabilize and another to cut. And I was able to cut toasted bread like a baguette while holding with my left hand, stabilizing with my left hand, but then gripping the knife with my right hand. Unfortunately, there's no footage of that, but as far as a real life or practical application for the device, I was able to experience changes that way post-session.
And within a session, patients were getting 30 minutes of stimulation, and then there were still another 60 minutes of therapy. So there were 90-minute sessions that patients were participating in, but only 30 minutes included the stimulation to take advantage of that sort of latent priming effect and the carryover.
Candace?
Was there preclinical research which went into the electrode array design? And if so, was it published and peer reviewed? And describe that for me, please.
So we recently have a paper published in iScience, published by one of our another collaborators. Yeah. And that is a publication we have. But regarding the development or the design of the electrode, we don't have anything published. That's kind of proprietary information. Yeah.
Candy?
Hi, Candy T. Portello from Crick Hospital. Thanks for the talk. I'll enter into the carrier frequency debate maybe just a little bit. So curious, in our spinal stimulation studies, we've found, or my observation has been, that the severity of injury may impact whether or not we use a carrier frequency. Those more severe injuries, it appears that to get to the level of stimulation we need to actually elicit voluntary motor control below the level of injury, when it is a motor complete injury, the carrier frequency is very helpful. When it's somebody who has a motor incomplete injury, we haven't had to use it necessarily to get that voluntary motor activity. So just curious if one, is the ExoStim device give you the option to use a carrier frequency? And then two, have you guys looked at that in any of your studies in terms of severity of injury, predicting whether or not a carrier frequency is beneficial?
I can take the first one. So the first question, whether ExoStim can support carrier frequency stimulation, I would say it can support almost a wide range of waveforms. So carrier frequency here, you start talking about 10 kilohertz, right? 0.1 millisecond pulse width. So that can be supported by ExoStim for sure.
Yeah, so we did not have access to the carrier frequency during the study, like we couldn't turn it on or off. And we did have patients who were C4A with very dense injuries. And we were able to get the stimulation high enough to elicit involuntary motor responses below the level of the injury. And then we would back it off so that they could then override it with their voluntary effort. So the lack of carrier frequency hasn't been a barrier for us, but I know that it is of a debate, and I'm more people at the party, whatever the people need.
Any last questions? So another one, Sasha. Asking about
Asking about-
autonomic functions, bowel and bladder specifically.
Yeah, so the pilot study was not designed to do that, but many of our patients who participated both in my previous study and in this pilot study reported changes in bowel and bladder function, whether that's bowel transit time, bladder sensation of fullness, ability to voluntarily void. All of those things did come up in our subjects. So we have added those as secondary outcomes for the pivotal trial, as well as blood pressure.
It's very interesting that we see bowel and bladder improvement by doing cervical spinal cord stimulation.
Okay, last question. Is that Claudia? No, Nana.
Hi, Nana Collette with NerveGen. Do you see this as a finite course of treatment or indefinite? And if finite, how long do you plan to follow up to see whether any benefits are maintained?
I'm so glad you asked this question. So I explain it. So I explain to my patients, this also gets at the rehab idea. I explain to my patients, right? Every car requires a level of maintenance. You are now driving super fancy high maintenance cars, right? You need to put a lot more effort into getting your car to run right than I do put into my Honda minivan. It's just, that's where you're at right now. So whether that's rehab, exercise, things you're doing at home, all of those things. So I think, this is just my opinion and my guess, that long-term, it's going to be like charging your battery, that you're going to plug in for 30 minutes every morning, and then you'll be able to go about your day. But there will be sort of a waning effect of the stimulation, and your damaged nervous system will require input always. And it's not a finite, nothing is finite for you, right? It's not, you can't go to rehab for 2 weeks and then expect things to change forever.
I would like to add my note. This also the question that we've kept asking ourselves. And during this conference, I kind of made our study participant. He's sitting in front of me, and the question I asked him yesterday morning is that after the trial, how long did the improvement still sustain? And he mentioned to me that he kind of felt improvement during the first few weeks, and then it got washed out after a few months. Then that kind of justify what Becca just said.
Yeah, I think it's true of any intervention too, right? If you get over a certain point where you can use that new skill functionally consistently, then it sort of self-reinforces, right? So if you go from a therapeutic ambulator to a household ambulator and you can walk more often safely, then you're going to do it more and it will make you more better. But if you are still a therapeutic ambulator and you're relying on those 2 or 3 times a week that you get to come to therapy and walk, that's not enough to make change. And so it's back to this essential question is, how do you get more volume? How do you turn up the volume in the system?
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.